AI in Action, Halldale's podcast series, which looks at how civil aviation, military, and other safety-critical industries are adopting AI in training.
So, welcome. My name's Andy Fawkes, special correspondent at Halldale Group, and today we're talking about VR in training, but it may go. We may look at other areas in aviation. We have a truly great set of speakers to talk about this, and I'll introduce them in a minute. Because we have companies that are sort of what you might call large and small, but also from looking at this from different angles as well. So hopefully you'll get a really good broad picture here, and also very current as well, which is very important to you. So in no particular order is Conor Beardmore, who is the creative director at Latitude 83 Aviation. We have Patrick Hejlesen, who is the chief ground instructor and an airline pilot at Sunclass Airlines. And we have Nicholas Bolton at Qantas, who is their technical lead for Immersive and Emerging Technologies. So absolutely fantastic set of speakers. So if I may start with you, Conor, could you just introduce yourself and then say your bit of a background and how your organisation is using VR, or in fact, supplying other people?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name's Conor. I'm 26 and I'm the creative director at a very small company called Latitude 83 Aviation. Probably a lot of people wouldn't have heard of who we are. We're incredibly small and we like to keep it that way. We started in the industry about 2 years ago. And to be honest, we've got the majority of the Halldale events to thank for that. Back in 2024, kind of fresh out of education, we kind of risked everything to go to WATS in Orlando and just see what the industry had to offer. And we looked at it from a different point of view, where we really wanted to push the technology forwards. Thankfully, at that event, we found some airlines that would take a leap on us, and we've been making recently VR systems, but hyper-realistic content, and putting a bit of a different technological edge on the way we try and educate our staff now.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And Patrick, could you do a similar?
Yeah, I can do my best. Unfortunately, I'm not English or Australian or anything. I'm just from Denmark, so my natural born language is Danish. So I'll do my best to do a little bit of English. But yeah, basically, I'm a pilot flying both the Airbus 321s and the 330s, and a little bit of background as an entrepreneur in the software business on the side when COVID hit us, of course. Then when I returned back into Sunclass after COVID, I became the chief ground instructor. And us at Airlines, we're not the biggest company in the world, but we've got one of the biggest ambitions in the world out there. And we've been working with VR for the past 10 years. We began the development more than 11 years now. And we work with everything we possibly can, but primary in the part of course, the cabin door training.
Fantastic. And Nick?
Yeah, hi. My name's Nick Bolton. I work as the Emerging Technology and Innovations within Qantas Airways, focusing on the VR program. Our big focus at the moment is VR training as a scalable training tool. We work on both pilots and cabin crew training. So VR as a whole has been running for a little over 2 years. So very new in the world of VR and training in aviation. But we deploy programs across most of our fleets at this point. We're focusing primarily pilot and cabin crew, not so much the engineering side of things, but that obviously will grow as this becomes more of a kind of mainline training program. From the pilot perspective, we're focusing just on SOPs, the initial start of training. Same on cabin crew, focusing on aircraft familiarisation and early stage of VPs. None of it's regulated in that space. We're just doing it on the initial form of training. And then focusing on what VR can be and how it can grow within the company and the training program, so that it can provide consistent training, it can provide accountability and accessibility for trainees and trainers, who are the primary factor of all of this. We can create a program, but it is all about the trainees and the people coming out of it, that you want to build a program so they feel empowered when they go out into the force and the front line for training, for their deployment.
Yeah, and we'll come back to regulation later, the regulatory picture, because that's, I think, very interesting. But maybe I'll start with you, Patrick. I mean, do you think VR now is routine and fully accepted, that it's just mainstream in the way you train people and educate people now?
Well, it's become a lot more. Of course, the highlight of it, like when we began 10 years ago, it hasn't been done before. And the world, the technology develops right now. Of course, VR and generally in immersive training, AR, XR, is getting more and more implemented in airlines. But there's also so much more to be done. The possibilities of technology, they're endless, and it needs people who dreams about it. It needs people who are visionary behind it, because otherwise it will never keep on going. And about the technology of VR within an airlines, I see we just attended WATS, and of course it was a hot potato, both as the most like underrated technology in the world, as well as the most overrated technology in the world. We also need to remember this. So
Yeah. So, but it's finding its place. I suppose it's still finding its place. Would you say then that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The more and more we enter the world of a virtual reality world, the more we can do in more realistic environments as possible, the more we can train, the more we can be able to make the mistakes on a virtual door rather than doing it on a real door.
Yeah, absolutely. And Conor, I mean, are you, with your customers, they've seen VR and they say, Conor, can you do this for me? Or are you taking a different approach, maybe saying, this is the training we want to do, and you say we could use VR? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, so we've got a really unique approach. So from a development point of view, I tend to say this quite a lot. We're not very good at business at Latitude 83, and it's a really weird thing to say. We have a VR system right now. Do I believe that VR is the cure of all ills when it comes to aviation training? Absolutely not. VR, I'll put my hand on my heart and say it, is terrible at some things, and it's fantastic at other things. And to go out and use VR as a band-aid for every single thing to hopefully make an airline's training budget 10 to 15% smaller, it's not that kind of solution. What it is it's a fantastic solution for the niche operations out there, for the niche airlines, for those little things that can genuinely benefit a cabin crew's training experience. And so it's not really a black and white question. It's more of a spectrum of colors. What airline are you representing? Where are your training bases? Does your airline have physical training equipment they can actually go and get on? Because from someone that makes a VR system, it's never going to be better than going to do the real thing. Do you have that? So it's such a wide spectrum. And really, from a business point of view, we treat every airline differently. So it's not a question of, here's our VR, take it. It's a question of, actually, we think there's 3 other technologies that you could use instead of using VR, which is going to give your staff more competency, it's going to give them more confidence, and it's probably going to be cheaper in the long run as well.
So, and thank you, Conor. And Nick, if as a large company, I mean, do you have the ability to do experimentation, to test, and how do you decide what is the sort of low hanging fruit, that those use cases for VR? How do you go about that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's the part where we pivoted weekly when we were trying to figure out what to do and where to go. The great thing, and Conor and Patrick, they've nailed it in that you can't just throw VR at everything for a solution. It is so bespoke. The way that we challenged it and we brought it on is that we had the 321 XLR as the problem that we had an aircraft being built and we had to train on it. We actually didn't have it. We didn't have any idea what it looked like. It was in a factory. We had snippets here and there, had no seats. You can't train cabin crew or pilots on that. So how do you do it? Now, head of training came along and said, well, great, let's look at the VR as a solution. Let's see how it can play a part in that. So that's how it grew initially. And amazing kudos for him for doing that, because we're able to create something which does allow pilots to get the real reach in the flight deck, to go, great, this is how an SOP works, this is our FCOM, these are the procedures we need to do. And then from a cabin training perspective, we focused just on aircraft familiarisation. What does the cabin look like? Where are the stowages? What do you have to look out for a seatbelt extension? Where are you going to find this and that? And that was so important because while one of the challenges was you want to get on the real aircraft, you can't. So how do we go about it? So we're able to get the cabin crew familiar with the cabin, and then that just allowed them that when they go on the aircraft, they're not blindsided. They have an idea of, great, this is what I'm kind of expecting. This is the color. This is where the seats are. This is where the stowages are, and that just provides confidence. And then that just leads on to customer satisfaction, everything that comes with it, because they're not worrying about other parts of, am I doing this right? Is this in the right area? So that confidence goes a wonderfully long way. But yeah, finding the right technology is difficult. Patrick, you know this, you've been doing it for more than 10 years. When we first started, the initial was, do we do high fidelity through a tethered virtual reality headset, or do we go down the route of untethered and have it all in the headset and then lose the high fidelity but gain the mobility and the scalability of where do we go? And we have a footprint issue. Like, Australia is large, but we have a base in every major city, but they're not huge, so we have to move around a little bit. We can't have laptops or computers locking us down, so we have to be mobile. We have to be able to pick up a headset in the cabinet and roll it to a different room. And if we go down the tethered part, which is a great, amazing high fidelity, we can't do that. So there are a lot of challenges early on in the training. And again, this program has been going for 2.5 years. We learned very quickly. And I will wholeheartedly say that it came from attending your WATS and ES and APATS, because that's where we learned from everybody else who's been doing it for such a long time. That information transfer was amazing. But you're creating something which in a large airline like Qantas, it has to go through your IT, it has to go through cyber, it has to go through procurement, legal. Like, there are a lot of other levels it has to go through to finding, and Patrick, you touched on it before, like your champions to find somebody who can push it through, your upper group leaders who can from a high level push it, but also your team have to be completely on board. And I'm fortunate, I work with the most amazing team. We're all very dedicated to what this is and the challenges with it. And without that, it can be very, very difficult to move a program like this to where it needs to be.
And Patrick, I think one of the use cases or uses of VR, maybe I should say that way, was cabin. Yeah, no, I do apologise, but using VR to acquaint the crew in advance. So that was one use of VR, or certain emergency procedures.
Sorry for me interrupt. Our biggest driver was in the beginning. It was just like, how do we make people learn? By having fun. Yeah, by making fun, by making mistakes. So when we began, it began as my boss having a look at his daughter playing a roller coaster game, and saying, "Oh wow, imagine what this like on her iPad. Imagine what this could be like in an aviation environment." So this began off as a fun thought to create interaction, because when we did door training, we did it on an overhead slide, like with the proper overhead with the lighting through it, posted on the wall, and then you had to touch the wall, and this was how it was. So when we began, it was just to make learning stick. Well, giving better chances of making learning stick, and of course we made a bunch of mistakes on the way to it, but the biggest financial driver for us in it, because of course when doing new tech, and especially getting money in training, it's one of the hardest thing in the world, because it's not like in flight ops where you say, okay, we can implement this in the system or in crew scheduling, and then we'll save this and this amount of fuel, or save this amount of crew, because it's really hard to define and put training into an Excel arc and development. And when we implemented the Airbus 321 Neo, we had an issue with overwing exits. And we had exactly the same issue as Nicholas had. We didn't have a physical door trainer, and we had to do the training. And if we needed to get the physical door training get developed, it would have costed 100 times more than developing a brand new VR system. So this really gave us the financial situation to even keeping on developing.
That's great. I mean, anyone could answer this one, I suppose. Is if I was just starting an airline, Fawkes Airlines, what would you say? And I was curious about VR. What would you say was be one of the first uses of it? What kind of training or and so forth?
I'd say that's quite difficult. So if you approach my business, for instance, and said that question, the first thing you'd probably ask me is this compliant? Does this lead into regulations? What can this replace that I can't do otherwise? And other than a bit of what we're doing with Sunclass, nothing at the moment, to be honest. It can't really regulatory, especially in the UK, replace anything. That's not to say it won't happen. It's just to say it's a very slow burner. So I think that's probably the first thing. If you've got spare money in your budget and you're willing to take a risk on the future, one that will have VR compliance systems taking over policies and procedures, then if you've got the budget, let's go ahead and run with it. Other than that, from a very honest, probably not very good at business Latitude 83, we would probably say, like, hold your horses. Let's look at compliant ways to do it. And then as you build your business, let's look at doing alt mocks. Let's do it. How can we change the regulations to work for you? And that's the way we would look at it as a business. We wouldn't try and take you down a path of disappointment. It's kind of, you got to play to the rules now, and let's tackle the policy second.
Thank you, Conor.
Yeah, but I would probably go through, like, where do you want to go? Like, when you're building, like, I want to go with VR. And the problem is also with VR, like, people, they get so fascinated with VR. It's the most fascinating thing in the world. So they just want to do it, but they forget to look at their client, at their colleagues, at the airline family, as the pilots and the cabin crew. Where do we want to? What do we want to shift? What do we want to do? And then by that we can identify that maybe VR would be the solution. But basically, I would be looking at where do you want to go? Where do you want to move? What are you dreaming about?
I think one thing that's quite interesting is the way the world is working now, not just in aviation training, just the entirety of the world, everything is getting digitalized. So our approach, what we would end up doing is we would 3D scan the entirety of your aircraft. Let's say you've got an A320, we'd scan the entire thing. The future requires your airline to become ones and zeros. Whether you want to invest in artificial intelligence, it requires having context of your aircraft in ones and zeros. Do you want interactivity in your LMS system? It requires your aircraft to be generated in ones and zeros. As soon as you do that core foundation, you can make it into whatever technology you want. You can make it into a VR system. You can put it SCORM compatible on your LMS system on Moodle. You could download it locally on your iPads. You can do whatever you want with it. And just previous to my point, like, just because it's not compliant today, I'm very confident that we will have a compliant system in the next 16 months. Very confident at that, which will replace cabin familiarisation. The door training might be a bit longer because there's physical touch you need for that. But when it comes to things like cabin familiarisation, aircraft walk around, I am very confident. I will come back on a podcast and I will eat a hat if it is not compliant in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
I think just quickly, I'll jump in
yes,
there quickly
please,
as
Nick,
well.
please do, yeah.
Yeah, our drive was 321, just because we couldn't get our hands on the aircraft. And the same thing for the Airbus 350. Now the ULR is the same side that we're about to start training on an aircraft that we don't have. So using VR and the initial drive for that and getting people on board. But we're at a point now where it is showing us, we've brought it into our lesson plan development. It has been brought into Qantas to a point where it is quite stable. But we are looking to what the future is. But for us, we have to create a program that shows the low-hanging fruit of what does work and how it fits in. So we're now collecting that data, and we go through a lot of surveys to provide to cabin crew and pilots, and they all have my email, and I get emails of telling me what works and what doesn't work, and they're completely brutal, and that's what I want, because I don't want to know, oh, I love your product. I want to know what doesn't work, and then we'll change that. Conor and Patrick, you're talking about it was, and Andy, if you have Fawkes Airline, the initial part for us was what I was trying to talk about before is bringing on IP. Do you want to own IP, or do you want to have that run by a third-party provider, which is completely fine, and that gets the program up and running. But then how are you going to modify that later on. So for us, we have 321 as an example. We built it and then it changed. We got the aircraft and various things have to change. So how do you pivot to that, and how do you change that? So we've blended to the point now where we've got both a third-party provider, and then we also have in-house development, so that we can make small changes, and our Unity program to make those changes instantaneous. So we made one last week. We had a change on a Friday, and Friday afternoon I had a new build. So keeping that flexibility again is super important from the way that we've kind of structured it. And again, we've all touched on it, but VR isn't replacing anything. It can't. We love simulators. You need to work on the hard assets. That's super important. You can't get rid of that. But it's about strengthening training where those traditional methods sometimes have their natural limitations, and then virtual reality steps in. Conor, you stepped on, there's so much tech out there. It changes weekly. Like if you on anything like your Reddits and your forums and online, there's a new tech, or someone's 3D printed a new VR goggle that you can use. It runs on an Android system. So you have to, if you're out there being flexible about it, there's so many low-hanging fruit 100%, but once you've created a VR program, you can reach to anything. Great, I'll apply to this, or emergency hatch, which is heavily regulated, but you can start to look into that space and go, okay, great, how can we bring the regulator on board to tackle something which is a low-hanging fruit but in the regulatory space, to dial in how virtual reality can provide that support.
We've kind of touched on that, actually, working with one of our airlines in the UK. If you really want a low-hanging fruit and you're an airline and you don't have the funds to go and spend £50,000 on virtual reality hardware, half of the airlines in the world now have, in my opinion, already invested in the best training tool possible, and that's the use of iPhones and iPads. It's getting quite rare now that you go and talk to an airline and they don't all have their own iPad. And from an investment point of view, they're only using them to 10% of their capability. So virtual reality doesn't just mean putting on some goggles and walking around and having eye tracking. It can mean interacting with a virtual reality through a different medium. So I think that's just a big, in my opinion, a bit of a misunderstanding in our industry. As soon as you say the words virtual reality, it's instantly, I'm putting on goggles, we don't want that. Actually, what we've done for a few airlines is we've built their exact aircraft one-to-one, and they can walk around it on their iPads. It can be offline. They can do it whilst watching telly. They can do it at a lunch break. If they want to practice how to disarm or arm a door, take it home. They can do it before their exam. And so that is what I would probably say is one of the easiest low-hanging fruits. If you've got a device, use it.
So that's
spot on. And we did that. We with a third party, we've got that for pilot training. So it's the same on the iPad, because they do take it home and they do their own training at home. Mm-hmm. We send our headsets home with pilots so that they have ground school for a week, and they have it for a week or so afterwards, so they can spend more time in that environment. For cabin crew, and this, we haven't really touched on it, but there are downsides to VR in that you can get motion sickness, you can get eye fatigue, you can get a whole range of things that can pop up, and you have to be able to manage that. And part of that is having an iPad, which, as you say, almost everyone has. We have electric flight bags, which are all iPad driven. So we know everybody has to have them. So for our training, everything that we build in VR is partnered with an iPad, and just to provide the comfort for a trainer who may not be able to be training in a virtual reality environment. They can still be there with their class and everything, but on an iPad, going through the same form of training.
So is the picture really that, as Conor said, you really need the digital data to start with, the 3D, and then you can choose how immersive you think the training needs to be? Is that a fair summary?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do feel like you don't want to make it too complicated. Patrick, you may be able to type in, you've been doing this for a lot longer, but from our level, we try not to overcomplicate our lesson plans. We limit our lesson plans for about 15 minutes at a time, because 9 out of 10 times they haven't gone through VR. And we have a huge range from age limits from 21, 20 years old all the way to 65. And you don't know where they fit in that scope of using virtual reality. And if they haven't, but 15 minutes is that nice. There's a huge amount of research and white papers online that you can read, but the cognitive load for VR is immense. Like there's so much information that your brain is trying to capture at the one time that you do get a fatigue. So we limit that initially. And that just helps provide that structure and support for the trainee moving through.
We have so much more to talk about, Nicholas. I can really highly relate to your but both with regard to the generational learning, interaction, adaptation to VR, the ups, the downs, and how to we've got a lot more. Maybe there's a season 2 to this podcast.
It's going to keep on giving.
To Denmark, mate.
We have
Well, you can soon come to London. Actually, pretty fast now. I've heard, Nicholas, from Qantas. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
It only takes 22 hours,
That's the non-stop flight, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe, Patrick, I read that EASA and indeed the US FAA have approved VR in certain situations. What is how is that affecting you?
Well, it has affected us pretty well. We when we implement the 321 overwings, we actually pretty fast got, the most important thing for us with everything we do, we also in the pilot act, we're also into like evidence-based training on a baseline philosophy, which means that we are we train on data, we train on evidence. And we've been we're one of the first. Well, we are the first airline in Denmark, but also here in the Nordics, who became evidence-based training on the mixed parts. It was 7 years ago, and which means that because we've been pretty early with VR, with evidence, with EPT, and a lot more, we bring our CAA, our regulators, within on the very beginning of our ideas, our brainstorms, our project, our developments, our training. We also supply a lot of training for our regulators also too, because we need to learn together, and from our perspective, we have a fantastic CAA in Denmark, and nobody wants to be the stopping the stop class in Danish. It's called
the blocker.
The blocker, exactly. Nobody wants to be the blocker. We all want to develop. We all here to enhance safety, to develop resilience within the crew, within the organization. So for us, we pretty fast. We brought them on board, told them about our project, and asked them, how can we do this? How what's your thoughts? What's your ideas? Got them in the brainstorm. We actually had, because of the overwing, so we had to use a combination of VR with regard to training on the overwing exit, but we still needed that feeling of when you pull off this handle cover and you pull the handle down, you need that physical feeling. So we actually built it like a pretty simple wooden device, which gave that feeling in combination with VR. So definitely that's, and I really feel like, the EASA and the FAA will be looking into total new regs within less than 5 years, no doubt about that. Also with regard to AI, but they're really developing with us, and that's also what I hear from a lot of other colleagues.
I think at WATS it was talked about this new EASA regulation where level D simulators are going to be less defined. It's going to be training. It's going to be training first approach.
Exactly. It's a really interesting it's a really interesting project, because we were also doing VR training for pilots before, but we actually quit that project just here less than a year ago, because we saw that pilots, they were adapting a lot more to the usage of the system than actually learning how to train the procedures, creating that muscle memory. So we had to look into, like, are we too keen on VR that we actually forget what was our aiming point? So, and then we got invited to be a part of another project exactly with VR and doing a level D simulation with a company here in Europe, where we use VR in a level D simulator with full hydraulic motion, and the visuals is incredible. It's wow! It's a next level simulation that can never be done in a traditional simulator. But it also has again its ups and the downs, because how does the human being react that we're not able to see each other's faces because we have a VR system, a VR goggle on it?
Yeah,
When these two pilots can't look into each other's eyes and do like 70-80% of our communication is nonverbal. So how do we identify each other? How do we interact? How do we read and adapt in a flight deck, doing critical, well, also in the cabin, of course, doing critical procedures?
yeah. And Nick, what about Australia and the regulatory picture there? Is that supportive of these new techniques?
Yeah, I think they are. I think, and Patrick, you just touched on it, is all about bringing them along for that journey, and creating that storyline so that it's not going to be hey, we've created this program, this is what we're doing out of the blue with no information behind it. It is about that long journey. When we first started bringing on our regulator, and we'd meet them in the hallways of our training facility, it's like, hey, have a look at our VR stuff, and whatever it was, just put them into a room and say, hey, just look, this is what we're working on. No, nothing ticketed to it. Just have a look at it. So that they've seen the progression. We're not biting off huge chunks. We're just focusing on one small problem. What does it do? What does it do well? What doesn't it do well? And then trickle it into the point now where we can have a serious conversation about, great, we're going to tackle this. Maybe it's not a door trainer, but an emergency hatch, one small portion of a regulation which requires a hard asset to train on, but with a huge amount of trainees that have to come through that point. How do you put 20 students through one asset and still consolidate a form of training around it? So we can use virtual reality. So we're at the point now, and we're very lucky to have them where they're very positive about what we're doing, to say, great, you're doing great work. Not sure how it fits in, but keep us in the loop, keep moving forward. So it's not a no, it's not a yes, but we're moving in the right direction. And what we're doing is virtual reality changes the environment. In Europe and America, it's quite large, and you have so many people driving this. But in Australia, there aren't that many, and it's very much, it's not we're all alone. We lean on a lot of what everybody else is doing, which is wonderful, and the learnings of it. But it allows us to change the aviation landscape here, and what we're doing now has a huge impact for the Australian airline, the aviation community. And it's not just for us, it's also for schools, like where we all learned in small little bug smashes flying around, but that can still be used, and VR can still be a portion of that, moving into MCC and moving into some form of airline training. Those transitional points, virtual reality can play a part, but it is still a heavy regulated area. So we have to get it right. And there's, I guess, a level of ownership that all of us, and I guess 4 of us talking now, is that we get it right. We create that foundation that we need so that it can grow. We grow it in the right way so that it's not backstepping 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's a complete progression the whole way through. But it is slow. It does take time, but it is making sure that the regulator has that story and that grounding of like, right, this is where we're moving forward. This is what we're trying to achieve, and be very clear about it. Headset technology makes a huge effort for that. It has to be like Patrick, the products out there that you can have now in these full flight simulators. The fidelity has to be huge. From a pilot perspective as well, they're used to very high fidelity. They're used to full flight sims, which are wonderful. You can't always recreate that in a virtual reality headset, and especially one that's not tethered. And initially that was a feedback which we got quite heavily, like, how do you create that high fidelity? But is it high fidelity that you want, or is it precision in training and the content that you need to get across the line because you're in that early stages? So I think the regulator is at the point where we can now have those conversations to go, right, what small chunk we're going to work on.
If you want me to just throw a grenade in this, from someone that's like, I've flown since I was 14, pretty much every single birthday was then at Manchester Airport. I've coded since I basically know how to use English. When we first attended that first WATS 2024 conference, no word of a lie, I was a firefighter at the time, had no aviation experience other than had my PPL. Thank the Lord that it happened during British school term, because my best friend was a science teacher and I paid him to come out with me. And we came to that first conference to see, like, right, we want to be wowed. You know, we're Generation Z. I was 23 at the time. We're ready to be wowed. what are these companies doing that we can't do from our own bedrooms when I was living at home with my mum and dad? And we walked through the exhibit hall. We had a look at what everyone was doing. And if you want my honest grenade opinion, none of it was very good. None of it was realistic. It looked like things that should have been designed for the Nintendo Wii. And then when there were all these discussions and talks going on about, oh, we still can't get it regulated yet. We still can't get it regulated yet. It's a bit like, of course you can't. It's awful. It's not very good. You know, it's a gimmick at the moment. We got to try most people's VR systems. And if you're going to be opening a door for an A320 and the door is shut and you just move your hand like that, in real life, that won't open the door. You're just pulling your hand against a door frame. So why don't you have to push forwards and go and cross? Most systems didn't have that. When we're having the discussion of high fidelity with an untethered system versus performance, you can have both. It's 100% doable. Like we've done it. It is doable. And I think it stems to something we call the aviation tax. And this happened in the last industry I worked in. You can charge a lot of money for these systems. And with a lot of money comes coasting, and it does normally take kind of a market distributor to really come in and shake things up, because most people are happy taking money, taking a paycheck and not doing much work, whereas actually you can make things look hyper realistic. You really can get things pushed through compliance, and there's so much scope for this industry. There is literally so much we can do, and I just think everyone's been sitting on their laurels a bit. I really do think that the systems we have now can be 10 times better with maybe 6 months of effort. And
Conor, you've given me a great segue into I do, because we're running out of time. I want to talk about the future. Of course, we can't get it. I don't expect us to be right on this, so you can say whatever you want. But I'll start with you, Nick. Looking to the future, and I mean, I think the future is very close, but let's say 5 years. It feels like we're on a VR journey for sure. The train has left the station, but there's still the journey isn't complete. I mean, how do you see things changing? Is it going to be regulation that changes, or is it just going to be the technology that I think Conor's referring to that's just coming from outside the industry anyway?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think adaptation of VR right now and this year is definitely working, and it's a fantastic product. But as Conor touched on before, the technology changes. It changes so quickly. How we apply it is so important. So I think moving forward, we touched on it as well before about AI. How does that play an impact on VR? And from an airline, especially from our airline, we're heavily invested into AI. But how does it work? Because it has user information. How do you use that? How do you train with it? A portion of that is from a big picture. I'd love to think that we can train on our full flight simulators with eye tracking and some form of biometrics, because you can train with pilots who are career pilots. They've got 45 years of knowledge, and they still meet, when they train and do their testing, they still meet a regulatory standard. So the wealth of knowledge in that is wonderful. And then you have a brand new green pilot who's coming through, who's learning the same regulatory standard, but from a green book, their 200-page FCOM and anything and everything that comes from that. But somewhere in the middle, you're going to find that really nice gap where you can still train, you can still have the huge amount of knowledge that comes into it. So I think in the future, it's how to harness that, it comes back to harnessing the information from your trainers to support your trainees. We can create, and like Conor said, you go to WATS, and there are all these applications out there. They're created by people who want to provide something for an airline, but the airline doesn't always match that, right? So it comes down to, what do we want the trainees to have? We're supporting them. At the end of the day, I have headsets that I would love to implement today or tomorrow, and programs which I know would be wonderful, but they actually don't apply. I've shown them to colleagues in the training sector, and they're like, it's wonderful, but it actually doesn't meet what we do. We need to focus on ABC. I'm like, okay, great. Well, I'll shelve that. Let's focus on what you need to do. And I think coming back to that, making sure that your group leaders and your systems in place that you're setting up within your airline or your company, focus on the end user. It truly is. There are so many things which we would love to bring in, but your trainer still has to get up and think, great, I want to wear this headset to do this training. If they don't want to do that, it's going to follow through to the trainee, and the trainee won't have a great experience. And you don't want that, because they've got so much pressure to get it right. They have to get so much training in such a short period of time, that this is a training aid. This is a training tool to provide support to them, so that when they get onto an aircraft or an emergency procedure, and again, AI comes into it, because I would love to be able to train somebody that the system reacts on what they say. So you can have passenger disruption of like, great, if they're interacting with you, how does that work? And there's no pressure. And if they do get pressure, they take the headset off, and they're not having 20 people watch them not manage a situation properly, and I've had that. I truly dislike being in front of everyone. I used to in training. I love it now, but I think there's a benefit to it, to be able to provide people a new way of learning. And as we know, trainees now, everyone has a different way of learning. So this is a great tool to be able to harness that.
Fantastic. Conor, the same question, if briefly, what do you see? Is it the regulation or the technology, and what aspects of technology perhaps?
Everything. I'm so confident for the future. I can only say this in like my experience in us as a developer, and us having the opportunity to work with Sunclass this past 6 months. From our point of view, we've really looked at this from, I think, a different lens. So us as developers, it passes on so beautifully for what Nicholas said before, is us as developers don't have a clue what airlines want. I am not a subject matter expert at Sunclass Airlines. I'm not a subject matter expert at Qantas. And to start making an off-the-shelf product which is designed to work for Qantas, and then try and rebrand it and expect it to work for another airline in a different part of the world, it wouldn't work. All of these airlines are worth billions. Well, most of them are. And my mindset is every airline should have its own completely built from the ground up VR system, because they've got all different isms. So when it comes to how can we implement technology, we were not short of ideas, especially working with someone like Patrick, where I had a text from him pretty much every single night saying, we've got this great idea, can we do it? And we're like, well, yes, we'll give it a go. So in the VR system we're using with Sunclass now, is every time they do an exam, if they get it wrong, our Casey AI has been watching their entire move. We're recording tens of thousands of data points per exam, and that artificial intelligence is now humanizing their feedback. So user 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you didn't do pin lever pin, you did pin pin lever. You know, so and that's it. That's in place today, and it took us like what, 5 months to get this up and running. We record all of that data, we give it to Sunclass, they can have it whenever they want, and then we can keep building that VR system on the data that we're learning. And that can be used in any language. You can control the headsets from anywhere in the world. Like, gosh, you should hear some of the crazy ideas that me and Patrick have that we're going to be hopefully implementing over the next 6 months. And it's
so
only
Patrick,
with those...
yeah,
go on, sorry.
So Patrick, I mean, I'll give you the last say on this then.
No.
Because in a way you've had quite a long time in this area. I'd be interested to see how you see the trajectory going.
You know, like the things that we dreamed about 10 years ago, that was a technical limitation, we are now able to do, and we are doing. We just we took a pretty big bold leap, and changed our whole philosophy, and like we wiped our entire code clean, because you know, with software, with coding, and you know, a lot of software providers, they'll probably relate to that. Like if you created your software in an old code and a bad code, you know, the amount of time and resource you need to do to redevelop that code, to rebuild it, to rewrite it, it takes for ages. You're out. And so for us, we took the really big leap, because we forgot our crew. You know, we forgot we forgot what. We forgot our main priority was to make it fun. So, you know, what we dreamed about 10 years ago, we can now, and we have done now. And as I see it, the technology is already here. Of course, it will continue more and more, and the regulations is not the blocker. Of course, the technology is kind of a blocker, because we want a lot more high resolution, a lot more like our like we want to create a lot more hyper-realistic environment than we're doing now. Our technological blocker is the physical hardware, but our codes are there, our models are there. We are ready for it. But the biggest blocker, and if the future really needs to, like, it's the one thing, and it's the industry. You know, the moment that we as an industry and airlines, we begin to speak to each other about their ideas instead of just sitting in a corner, not telling anyone about it. The moment me and Nicholas will pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Nicholas, I've got this idea. What do you reckon about this?" And then we spitball it back and forth. Then we bring Con on board, and then we bring a lot more airlines on board. And it is here where technology will develop. This is here now. It can.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And
We've got
I
a
hope
bunch of what we want to do. We've got a bunch of dreams. We can do it now. But yeah, we've got low negative. We've got no blockers. We're just full rush forward.
well, I think we need to do more podcasts on this subject to help spread the word and the best practice, which is really what we're trying to do in Haldale, spread best practice around the world. And what a fantastic set of speakers we've had, and I'm really grateful. Had Patrick from Sunclass Airlines, had Nick from Qantas, and we've had Conor, Latitude 83. So I'm really grateful for your time today. We've covered a lot of ground. I really get the feeling that the train has left the station. We're still on the journey, but we need to keep talking.